Participles, 4-minute grammar. What do you think of when you hear verb? You probably think of words such as punch, run, or cry. But these words can actually be numerous parts of speech depending on their form. That's where a participle comes into play. A participle is a verb form acting as an adjective, so it describes a noun. Participles commonly end in ing or ed, but can have many other endings. Let's take a look at a couple examples. The babies reacted strongly to the applauding crowd. Applauding is describing crowd. Since crowd is a noun, that makes applauding an adjective. Applauding is also a verb form because applaud is something you can do. That makes it a participle. The second sentence, the crying baby stole the show. Crying is a verb form, but in this case it's describing baby. So crying would also be a participle. Not all participles end in ing though. For example, the abandoned house in town is like something from a horror movie. The word abandoned is a verb form, but in this sentence it is describing the noun house, so abandoned is also a participle. Some participles also have a phrase with it. A participle phrase includes the participle and any objects or modifiers of the participle. The entire participle phrase acts as a single adjective. Walking along the beach, Raymond collected jellyfish. Walking is a verb form. Now we also include anything that goes with it, that gives it more information, in this case, along the beach, to make our phrase. Walking along the beach is describing Raymond, which is a noun. So it is a phrase that starts with a verb form and describes a noun. That makes walking along the beach a participle phrase. If you're trying to decide between two possible words or phrases, the participle or participle phrase is typically the one that can be taken out of the sentence, because usually adjectives can be removed from a sentence without changing the meaning of it. Let's put this rule to the test. Let's say in this sentence you're debating between charming and convinced. Since those two words are both verb forms, if we remove convinced from the sentence now says, the charming salesman, the very tall man to buy the car. That clearly doesn't make sense. So convinced is probably not the participle, but rather the actual verb in the sentence. Now let's remove charming. The sentence now says, the salesman convinced the very tall man to buy the car. This sentence makes perfect sense. That means charming is the participle because typically adjectives can be easily removed from a sentence and the sentence will still make sense. Last example. Frightened by the loud fireworks, the dog hid behind me. If we're debating between these two phrases, remove one and test it. Frightened by the loud fireworks, the dog. That clearly doesn't make sense, so that is not going to be the participle phrase. The dog hid behind me. That sounds like a complete sentence. So, frightened by the loud fireworks, the part that we removed, must be the participle. Since it describes the dog and starts with the verb form, it definitely is. Quick recap. A participle is a verb form acting as an adjective. Most end in ing or ed, but they can have many different endings. A participle could be one word or a phrase. A participle or participle phrase can typically be removed from the sentence, and the sentence will still make sense.